Okay, so now we begin a period called, I'll call it the fall of the Roman Empire. I should more define it as a decline of the Roman Empire. We're looking at a period now picking up around 96 with the end of Vespasian's family, and then taking it to the 400s when you'll actually see a fall. This period here I should call the decline, and then the fall would start at around the 200 mark. So we got about 100 years of okay period, and then a decline from 200. As we pick up here in 96 with the end of Vespasian's family, the Flavian emperors, we have a period of 5 good emperors, 5 in a row actually. So from the period from 96 to 180, this will be good for Rome. 5 emperors who come along one after another who are interested in governing and making a better empire. So we list them as the 5 good emperors. I'm only going to list a few of them for you. I don't want to mention all 5 of them, but this is a good 100-year period, basically, of 5 good emperors. I want to mention Trajan. Again, I just mentioned him a second ago. He was responsible for taking the empire to its greatest extent. The conquest have continued. He has continued to push the boundaries out in various aspects. So under him, the empire is still expanding and reaches its greatest extent. And he also is famous with the Christians for issuing the don't ask, don't tell policy, taking the pressure off Christianity. Your next emperor, or one of these 5, is Hadrian, Emperor Hadrian, very famous for, if you'll notice, his beard. He will be the first of the bearded emperors, and the trend will continue after him. Hadrian is the one who will step up and stop the expansion that Trajan has taken it as far as we need to go. We need to actually maybe secure what we have. And it's under him that he will start to delineate what is the boundaries. And at certain boundaries, he will put up a wall. Most famous wall will be up in Scotland, or the English border of Scotland, but there are other walls, there are other locations where they define that just put up a wall, no more expansion outward, and just keep the barbarians away. Hadrian's Wall, as you can see, marking off the extent. Hadrian's Wall is up in on the island of Britain, where the Romans have pushed these Britain people as far north as they're going to go, and so just going to build a wall and just keep them to the north. The people to the north don't want to be civilized, and so the wall will be built at the narrowest neck of, this will be Britain here, and then that will be the land of the barbarian Britons, later to be the Scots. And so the wall is actually pretty nice. It's about 70 miles long. The Romans are good wall builders, and it's still there today actually, or parts of it. You can actually see where it was, and you can walk along it. As you see, it's not a huge wall. It's not the Great Wall of China, but built to basically keep the people north of it from coming into the Roman lands. They would still might be able to raid in, but the Romans would have a fort every mile along here, which would set off an alarm if the people from the north came south. The blue-colored people, the Picts up there to the north, came to the south. The Romans would have an alarm system. Hadrian also had a great palace in Italy. Is Hadrian's Palace, very famous for its architecture and taste. Our next and the last of the 5 good emperors is Marcus Aurelius. You might have heard of him. There's a movie about him, a recent movie about him, or not about him, but about part of it about him. He's most famous in history for having written a book about being emperor. A book called Meditations, his thoughts on being emperor. And in this we get to see the daily life of an emperor. What was it like to be an emperor? Instead of just looking at Roman records, here's an emperor writing about being an emperor. And in it we see that it's not exactly a lot of fun for him. It's a lot of drudgery work. He doesn't really enjoy the job. And we see his stoicism come out. He is a stoic, and so you can then understand more about Roman philosophy if you can read his diary. Again, he accepts his place in life, that this is what the fate has brought to him, and so he has to do the best at his job. He's an emperor. He doesn't necessarily like it, but this is how high he's risen. And he cares about the empire and running a good empire. The movie I mentioned is the movie Gladiator. The movie starts off with the old emperor, that's Marcus Aurelius, and he's his son. The relationship between father and son, and then a gladiator steps into it. The movie is sort of realistic and then sort of fictional. It's historical fiction. They've injected a character into this relationship between father and son. The historical record is that father actually passes the empire to his son. And the movie kind of hints that maybe this guy is going to be a terrible emperor, and this is true. Marcus Aurelius' son is going to be the start of the bad times if you're trying to figure out when did the Roman Empire start to go bad, it's with this guy, Marcus Aurelius, his son, Marcus Aurelius, a good emperor, passing it to his son, who is a bad emperor, and his name is Commodus. So this will mark the beginning of the decline, the wheels starting to wobble a bit on the train, Commodus. And the movie gets it kind of right, actually, in many ways, that Commodus was famous for spending money. His father was very financially stable. The son will spend money ruthlessly or just throwing money around for no reason. Also very corrupt. He will have a terrible administration of people who are just making money. He's also very vain. The movie brought that out, of showing here's a guy who only cares about the way he looks and the way he's perceived. And then he also fancied himself a gladiator. This is the most famous statue of him, and actually there are many of them, where he presents himself. This was his standard picture as Hercules. He is a modern Hercules, a demigod. It's not quite God, but a demigod. And he did like to fight. He actually would go into the ring, the arenas, and actually fight. They were staged matches. He was going to win, and he always won his matches. But it just shows how vain he was and how he fancies himself a great warrior, but he doesn't really want to have to fight. And that kind of came out in the movie. In fact, he actually is killed by a gladiator. In the movie, he's killed in the arena by a gladiator, but in real life, he was actually killed by a gladiator who was a hired assassin who killed him in the palace. But this marks the start of the bad times. Commodus, a bad emperor. And so then we spin down to really bad times. The really bad times hit. The worst of the worst is from 235 to 284, this 50-year period. Things get really bad. The train should go off the track at this point. That 50-year period, there are 22 emperors. That's going to be a lot of changeover. There's no reason to even get used to an emperor because he won't be there long. They will die in the office. They will die of violent deaths. The next guy will step up and try to take them out, and the next guy will try to step up and take that guy out. So there's no sense in even knowing who the emperor is because he won't be there long. This is instability at the highest office. The train still goes on because there's stability at some of the lower offices, but the higher office isn't working well at all. Another thing we see here is the bread and circuses. If you're going to be the emperor, you've got to provide certain things. A requirement to be emperor is that you provide the bread and circuses. This actually goes back to Caesar. Caesar actually started this, but now it gets out of control. The bread is referring to the free food. The Romans, the people of the cities, expect free food now. The empire and the emperor is there to give you free food. And then the circuses are entertainment. A circus or a circle would refer to anything inside that circle: gladiator games, horse racing, chariot racing. The Romans are huge chariot fans. And the emperor provides this, or some kind of a politician must provide these games. And this is a way, as times go bad, of distracting the people. You've got your free food, you've got your free entertainment, so just let the train roll along, even though it's going to crash, seemingly. So this is just bad times. The empire now, and if an emperor is responsible for bread and circuses, he has to provide money, and as nobody's necessarily going to provide their tax money to him because they figure he won't be there long anyway, he has to provide these bread and circuses, and the way that they'll do it is by collecting whatever coins they can get their hands on, whatever gold and silver they can get, and then melting it down and then recasting it, debasing the coinage, mixing the gold and silver with some other metals such that it doesn't quite have the value, but the coins exist. And so you have to accept them, or you should have to accept them if the emperor gives them. This is debased coinage, though, and it doesn't take long for people to figure out that the coins isn't as good as it used to be, and this causes inflation. And it also causes a lack of faith in the government. Why would I want to accept the government coins anymore? Because I know they're not going to be valuable next year, and people will start hoarding now. People will begin to hoard. If you have gold and silver, you'll want to hoard it away. Another aspect that's going on here is that the Pax Romana is over by 200. The gates are starting to break down. Barbarians are at the gates. They've been at the gates since we talked about Caesar. He fought barbarians along the Rhine River. But now it's getting to the point where you can't stop them anymore. Even Augustus, with his auxiliary troops to be used against other barbarians, they can't handle it. They are coming over the barriers. The Goths along the Danube River, this huge river across east-west across Europe. They're coming over that river, and they can't be stopped. The Franks, a big German tribe, comes over the Rhine River and will settle into Gaul, which eventually we can start calling the land of the Franks, or France. what will start to be called, but right now it's called Gaul, but these Franks are settling in there, and the Romans can't stop them. Just kind of make a deal. Let these Goths or Franks come in and just try to make a deal with them and hope they'll settle down. In the east, on the eastern border too, there are invasions over there. You have the rebirth of the Persians. These are the Neo-Persians. If you remember, Alexander knocked out the old Persians. This is the rebirth of Persia here. They're called the Sassanids, and they come attacking up through Mesopotamia, and that's where you'll start hitting the Roman Empire. The Romans have made it all the way to Mesopotamia, and now you got to fight these Sassanids. And the picture here shows that these Sassanids have some cavalry that the Romans have trouble dealing with, armored cavalry. And so the Sassanids start to invade into Asia Minor, and the Romans are going to be recoiling back toward the Mediterranean Sea. Well, as all this is happening, as all hell seems to be breaking loose on the Romans, you will see a reaction, and it's kind of a reaction you would do if government starts to fail and the cities start to fail and there's chaos and the coinage starts to fail, the money becomes worthless. A lot of wealthy Romans will pack their gold and silver away and then get out of the cities. They'll move out to the countryside. They can afford to move out to the countryside and buy a bunch of land, build a big house. The Romans will call it a villa, a big armored house there. And then they'll hire private guards. They'll have their own little army, small army of private guards to guard them. They'll be the equivalent of a knight. What you're seeing here basically is the birth of a medieval system as you would know it. A wealthy man who lives in a house, he's got private guards, and then he's going to have people gather around him. Workers will come to him because as all chaos is happening and there's roving bands of warriors and bandits everywhere, you need someone to protect you. And so workers will come to the villa asking for protection. Can I just live near the big house? And the private guards will protect you. And what you will do is you'll provide your work for free. You will provide work to the villa in exchange for protection. This basically is serfdom. This is the start of serfdom, where you don't own property. You simply work for somebody for protection as money begins to fail and a barter system breaks out. And the drawing of a Roman villa, small armored house, and eventually you'll see them get taller with towers on them, so you can see the enemy coming. But this is where the birth of castles will come from. You'll see it first in Italy, and then spreading into other parts of Europe. Just when you could predict by 300 that the empire is going to fail, the empire is spared. Two emperors, back to back, two strong emperors step up and actually save the empire. The first of them, and I'll go into both of them in detail, the first of them is a guy named Diocletian. From the period of 284 when he becomes emperor till 305, a period of about 20 years, he will do a great job of saving the empire. Maybe not a great job of making a good empire, but it will be spared in his 20 years. And then he'll be followed by Constantine from 306 to 337, a 30-year period. So between these two men, two emperors over 50 years, and they'll make the reforms necessary to save the empire. Let's begin with Diocletian. From 284 to 305, this 20-year period, he will make the reforms. Except he makes them in a way that maybe we don't need to continue the empire. It's very authoritarian. So you'll go from an empire that's one of innovation and creation to one of simply obey the rules. And he will order it divinely, that he has the authority of the Roman gods behind him. Divine rule from the gods. The gods speak through him. This is called the dominate. In other words, we're done with the principate, the idea of a government friendly to you. This is a dominate. You will do what you're told because the government says you must. It's an emergency measure done to save the empire. Again, if you'll see pictures of Diocletian, he's not the happiest looking guy. He's a military man who steps up and makes your new government one that's very military. The Senate will exist. There will be a thing called the Senate, but it's simply a rubber stamp. The emperor will simply decree, and the Senate will rubber stamp it. His administration, again, he's a military man, and his civil administration will now take on a military discipline. The way that the military runs things, now the civilian government will run things that way also, with a military discipline. He will decentralize. Now, I need to explain this. A centralized government is one where one man holds the power, or a central agency holds the power, and all decisions are made from that central agency. He decentralizes things. The empire is just too big for one man. He'll break it into 4 pieces, actually. It's called the tetrarchy, a 4-piece empire. He starts by dividing the empire, north to south, and I'll show you the line where he divides it, and then he'll divide those in half. So a split, and then those are split. And then he'll assign a junior emperor. So it's actually going to be two emperors, Diocletian and his junior emperor, which is a good idea. That way when he dies, you should have a man step up, ready to go to be your emperor. They'll use the term Augustus. So you'll have an Augustus on the east and Augustus on the west. And then each of those will have an underling. So you'll have two emperors and then a man serving under him to be learning the trade. Those are called Caesars. So you'll have two Augustuses and then two Caesars in the parts of the empire. A tetrarchy, 4 pieces of empire. Here's a map showing the split. The split occurs off the back of the heel of Italy. From right here on the back of Italy, back off the heel and all the way down to Africa. The split is an east-west split behind Italy, to the east of Italy. And that's the important split I want you to know. That when we talk about the fall of Rome, we're actually going to be discussing the fall of the western half. The eastern half will actually stay up. But that's the split right there. And then the other split occurs kind of through here and then over there. But the main split here is the one I want you to know about. The north-south split of the empire. And Diocletian will rule over here, and he'll have a junior emperor on the western side. So the tetrarchy, and beyond that, he will divide the empire into what are called dioceses. We would call these provinces. He'll use the term diocese. And if that rings